Story 1. Last autumn, Emma relocated to Boston for a promising new job, eager to embrace the bustling city life. Her workdays often stretched late into the evening, and she relied on the subway to get home, following a predictable routine that initially felt comforting. Over time, however, Emma began to notice someone who seemed disturbingly familiar with her schedule, someone who never spoke but was always there. At first, it seemed harmless, a man in a dark hoodie and baseball cap, sitting a few seats away, scrolling absently on his phone. Occasionally, he'd stand near the doors or linger by the station exit. Emma dismissed it as coincidence, attributing it to the crowded nature of urban living. But then, Emma noticed him outside the subway system at her bus stop. One chilly night, as she disembarked at her usual stop, an unsettling prickle crawled up her spine. Glancing over her shoulder, she spotted him standing under a flickering street lamp, his head tilted slightly, watching her. Her pulse quickened, but she reassured herself it was just paranoia. Surely, he wasn't following her home, right? The next evening, Emma decided to test her theory. She switched trains at the last moment, boarding a different line entirely. As the train pulled away, she scanned the platform. He was still there, motionless, staring after her departing train. A chill ran down her spine. This wasn't normal. This wasn't a coincidence. By the time she reached her apartment, her hands were trembling. Maybe he wasn't dangerous, but why was he always around? Emma convinced herself she was imagining things, yet a nagging voice in her mind whispered, "What if he knows where you live?" That night, she double-checked her locks before going to bed. For several days, Emma altered her commute, different trains, buses, even walking extra blocks. But somehow, he kept reappearing. Not every night, but frequently enough to keep her anxiety simmering. One evening, leaving work early, she ventured down an unfamiliar street only to see him leaning against a building ahead, his face obscured beneath that same baseball cap. That was the night Emma stopped pretending. He knew her schedule, knew where she'd be, even when she changed her routine. She confided in her coworker Sarah, but Sarah laughed it off. Probably just some guy with a crush, she joked. If he hasn't done anything, don't freak out. But it wasn't curiosity in his gaze, it was patience. That weekend, Emma went out with friends, hoping to shake the growing paranoia. She took a rideshare home instead of the subway, relieved to avoid him for once. But as she stepped out of the car, her stomach sank. He was there, standing across the street, completely still, facing her building. He hadn't followed her from the bar. He was already there. Emma bolted inside, locking her door and checking her windows. Her third-floor apartment should have been safe, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Sleep eluded her that night. The next morning, Emma tried to convince herself it had been a fluke. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe she was overthinking. But deep down, she knew better. The next night, she stayed late at work. By the time she reached her station, it was nearly deserted. The wind howled through the underground tunnel as she stepped onto the platform. Then she saw him, standing at the far end, partially hidden behind a column, staring straight at her. Emma froze. The train wasn't due for another 5 minutes. She pulled out her phone and pretended to text, heart hammering in her chest. Would he approach? Do something? The seconds dragged on, then finally, the train roared into the station. Emma boarded, gripping the pole near the door, forcing herself not to look back. But as the train pulled away, she couldn't resist glancing back. He was still standing there, unmoving. That's when Emma made a mistake. Instead of heading straight home, she decided to investigate. She got off at the next stop and doubled back, taking a different route to her apartment. If he was truly following her, he'd show up again. She walked briskly, nerves electric. Her building was only a block away when she heard footsteps behind her, not hurried, not running, just steady, deliberate steps. Her stomach twisted into knots. She didn't want to turn around. She already knew who it was. Reaching her front door, she fumbled with her keys. The footsteps stopped. Summoning her courage, she glanced over her shoulder, and her blood ran cold. He was standing across the street, directly beneath the street lamp. He wasn't moving. He wasn't leaving. He was just waiting. That night, Emma barely slept. Every sound made her skin crawl. Her curtains were drawn, her door locked. But she couldn't shake the feeling that he was out there, watching, waiting, and she had no idea what he wanted. The next morning, she made a decision. She needed help. She visited the local police station and recounted everything: the subway, the bus stop, her apartment. The officer listened attentively, but his response left her disheartened. Unless he's threatened you or attempted to break in, there's not much we can do. Emma left feeling frustrated and helpless. How long before he escalated, Emma started staying with her friend Mia, hoping a change of routine would deter him. For a few nights, it worked. She didn't see him at the station or near Mia's apartment. Her nerves began to settle. Maybe he'd lost interest. Maybe she was finally safe. But then she found the note. It had been slipped under her apartment door while she was away. Just 3 words written in neat, careful handwriting. See you soon. Panic washed over her. He had been inside the building. Her locks weren't broken. Her windows were shut. So how did he know someone here? Had he followed her inside before? Her breathing grew shallow as she reread the note, hands trembling. This wasn't just watching anymore. This was a warning. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. Every noise made her jump. Mia tried to calm her down, suggesting it might have been a prank, but Emma knew better. He wanted her to know he could get close. He wanted her afraid, and he had succeeded. She started carrying pepper spray, scrutinizing every shadow before stepping outside. But the worst part, he still hadn't spoken a word. Days passed without another sighting, but the fear never left her. Then, One evening, Mia and Emma were returning from dinner when Emma saw him again, standing across the street, watching. Her stomach churned. Mia saw him too, whispering, "Oh my God, he's real." She grabbed Emma's arm and pulled her inside. This time, Emma called the police again. When they arrived, he was gone. She described him again. Same hoodie, same cap, same cold, silent stare. The officer sighed and said, "We'll patrol the area, but unless he does something." Emma knew how that sentence ended. She wasn't safe, not really. She just had to wait for him to make his move that night. Emma devised a plan. She wouldn't live in fear anymore. Mia offered to stay over, but Emma needed to handle this herself. She set up her phone near the window, camera facing the street. If he showed up, she'd have proof. Hours passed. Then at exactly 2:37 a.m., her phone buzzed, a motion alert. Her heart pounded as she picked it up. The screen showed him standing at the entrance of her building, unmoving, staring at the door like he was waiting for something. Her stomach twisted. How long had he been there? She grabbed her phone, dialing 9.1.1 with shaking fingers. "He's here right now," she whispered to the operator. "Please hurry." She stayed hidden, barely breathing. Minutes passed like hours, then loud knocking, not on her door, but on the building's front entrance. Red and blue lights flashed through her window. She crept forward, watching as officers stepped out, shining their flashlights. He was gone, just like before. The police searched the area, but found nothing. One officer stayed behind to take her statement. "We'll check nearby cameras, but he's good at avoiding them." His words sent a shiver down her spine. He had done this before. He knew how to stay unseen. "You should stay somewhere else for now," the officer advised. Emma agreed immediately. She packed a bag and left that night, crashing at Mia's place again. But sleep wouldn't come. What if he followed her here? Every sound made her skin crawl. Morning couldn't arrive fast enough. The next day, Emma went to her landlord. "I'm breaking my lease," she told him. She didn't care about the penalty, she just needed to escape. 2 weeks later, she was gone, new apartment, new neighborhood, new schedule. She changed everything, no more late-night subways, no more predictable routes. She wanted to disappear from his sight. For a while, it worked. No more notes, no more shadows lurking at bus stops. She finally felt free. But even now, sometimes she gets this feeling like someone's watching, a chill creeping down her spine when she's alone, a shadow in the corner of her vision. She tells herself it's paranoia, that she escaped. But deep down, she knows the truth. He never spoke, never touched her, but he was patient. And patience means he's still out there. Story 2. Leela moved into her modest apartment in Portland, Oregon, just a few months ago. It wasn't anything luxurious, just a small unit on the 4th floor, overlooking a quiet parking lot. The rent was affordable, and the neighborhood was serene, which suited her perfectly. She worked long hours and rarely spent time at home. But lately, something had begun to feel off. At first, Leela dismissed it as paranoia, the sensation of being watched, the occasional creak in the floorboards. After all, it was an old building. But then she started noticing strange occurrences. Her blinds, which she always closed before bed, would be slightly open in the morning. There were faint smudges on the outside of her window pane, as though someone had pressed their hands against the glass. One night, Leela woke with a start, heart racing. She had heard something, a faint tapping against the window. Holding her breath, she turned her head. The blinds were shut, but her skin prickled with dread. She lay frozen, straining to listen, but after a few minutes of silence, she convinced herself it was just the wind and forced herself back to sleep. The next evening, Leela returned home late from work. As she approached her apartment door, she noticed something odd. The blinds were already halfway open. She was certain she had closed them that morning. Her stomach twisted. She stepped inside cautiously, flipping on the lights. Everything appeared normal, but she couldn't shake the unease crawling up her spine. She checked the window, locking it securely. The latch was intact, but doubt gnawed at her. She even pushed against the glass to ensure it wouldn't budge. Then she closed the blinds again and tried to relax. Maybe she had simply forgotten to close them. Maybe she was overthinking that night. Leela fell asleep with the uneasy feeling still lingering. Sometime past midnight, a noise jolted her awake, a soft, deliberate scraping sound against the window pane. She didn't move. Her heart pounded as she slowly turned her head toward the sound. Through a tiny gap in the blinds, she saw it, a face. She sucked in a sharp breath, her body paralyzed with fear. The face was motionless, pressed against the glass, pale with hollow eyes staring straight into her room. Then, just as suddenly as she noticed it, it vanished. Her chest tightened. Had she imagined it? No, she knew what she had seen. She scrambled out of bed, grabbing her phone with trembling hands. Dialing 9.1.1 felt like an eternity. "Someone's outside my window," she whispered, pressing herself against the wall. The dispatcher stayed on the line, but by the time the police arrived, the figure was gone. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing. The officers took her statement, but didn't seem overly concerned. "Could have been a prank," one of them suggested. Another mentioned it might have been a trick of the light. Leela wanted to argue, but the lack of evidence made her doubt herself. Maybe she was just exhausted. Maybe it really was nothing. The next few days were quiet. She told herself it was over. But then, one evening, she stepped into her apartment and immediately noticed something wrong. Her blinds, they were wide open. She never left them like that. Her pulse quickened as she backed away, scanning the room for any signs of forced entry. Everything else was untouched, no broken locks, no open doors. But someone had been inside. She was sure of it. She checked the windows again, still locked from the inside. How was this happening? was someone already inside the apartment. She grabbed a kitchen knife and checked every closet, under the bed, behind the shower curtain. Nothing. No signs of anyone, but she couldn't shake the feeling that whoever had been watching her was still watching. She barely slept that night. Every sound made her jump. The next morning, she called her landlord and asked if maintenance had been in her apartment. "No one's been there," he assured her. Her stomach sank. Then, as she stepped toward the window, she saw it, a note taped to the outside of the glass. She hesitated before pulling it off, her hands clammy. 3 words were scrawled in uneven handwriting. "See you soon." Her legs nearly gave out. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. Someone had been here, and they weren't done. She couldn't stay there anymore. She packed a small bag and drove to a motel across town. Sleep didn't come easily, and when it did, it was restless. Every shadow outside her window made her skin crawl. She kept replaying that note in her head, "See you soon." The next morning, she called the building manager again. This time, she insisted they check the security cameras. He sighed but agreed. A few hours later, he called her back, his voice tense. "You might want to come see this," he said. Her stomach dropped as she drove back to the apartment. She met him in the small security office. The footage was grainy but clear enough. At 4:17 a.m., someone had climbed up the fire escape. They moved strangely slow and deliberate, then pressed their face against her window, staying there for a full minute before taping the note. Her blood ran cold. The figure wore a hood, face barely visible except for their hollow eyes. But the worst part, they never left the way they came. The fire escape remained still, untouched. The person had vanished. Leela felt sick. She called the police again, showing them the footage. One officer rubbed his chin and muttered, "We'll look into it." But they didn't seem convinced. There were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, and without a clear face, there was little they could do. She was on her own. That night, she sat in her car outside the apartment, watching her own window. She didn't know what she was expecting, but at exactly 4:17 a.m., movement caught her eye. The blinds in her apartment slowly shifted from the inside. She felt frozen in place, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. The blinds swayed again, slower this time. There was no wind, no reason for them to move. Someone was inside her apartment. It was supposed to be empty. She reached for her phone with shaking hands, dialing 9.1.1. The dispatcher's voice was calm, but she wasn't. "There's someone in my apartment," she whispered. They told her to stay put and wait for officers. She kept her eyes on the window, heart hammering. Minutes felt like hours. Then the blind snapped shut completely. Whoever was inside knew she was watching. That realization sent a cold wave of terror through her. She started her car, ready to leave, but then she saw it. The front door creaked open just a sliver. She watched, breath held, expecting someone to step out. but no one did. The door simply remained open, inviting, taunting. A part of her wanted to drive away and never look back, but another part, a reckless part, needed answers. She grabbed her flashlight and stepped out. She approached the building cautiously. Every sound amplified her footsteps on the pavement, the distant hum of traffic. The air was thick with dread as she reached her door. She nudged it open, shining her flashlight inside. The apartment was eerily silent and still, but something felt wrong. Then a soft creak. She swung the light toward her bedroom. The closet door was open now, just a crack. She knew for a fact it had been shut before. Her fingers trembled over her phone screen, ready to call 9.1.1 again. Then, from the darkness inside the closet, she heard breathing. She stumbled back, nearly dropping her phone. She wasn't alone. The breathing grew louder, ragged. Then, slowly, impossibly, the door pushed open further. A figure stepped forward, just out of the flashlight's reach. She bolted. She didn't stop running until she was in her car, doors locked. Through the window, she saw the closet door fully open now, but no one came out. By the time the police arrived, her apartment was empty again. No sign of forced entry, no footprints, nothing. Just the lingering sense that she had been watched. She broke her lease the next day and moved to another city. But sometimes, late at night, she feels it, that creeping sensation of being observed. And when she wakes up, her bedroom blinds are always just slightly open. Story 3. Nathan doesn't usually pick up hitchhikers, especially not in the dead of night on a foggy road, miles from the nearest town. But that night, something compelled him to slow down, perhaps guilt, perhaps curiosity. Either way, he wishes he had kept driving. She stood on the shoulder, barely visible in the mist. Her pale dress clung to her as though she had been walking in the rain for hours. Long, dark hair obscured most of her face, one hand stretched out, thumb raised, motioning for a ride. Everything in Nathan screamed to keep going, but he pulled over. The moment she got in, the temperature inside the car plummeted. It wasn't just the cold from outside. It felt deeper, like the air had thinned. She sat unnaturally still, hands folded in her lap. "Where are you headed?" Nathan asked, his voice uneasy. She hesitated, then whispered, "Just down the road." "Home." Her voice barely carried over the hum of the engine. Something about her tone sent a chill up his spine. He focused on the road, but he could feel her staring. He kept his eyes forward, gripping the wheel. The silence between them stretched thick and suffocating. He tried again. "Are you okay? You live nearby?" She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, it was almost a whisper. "I've been waiting for you." A lump formed in Nathan's throat. He glanced at her, but she was still staring ahead, expression blank. The road seemed to stretch endlessly, swallowed by the night. He hadn't even asked for an address. His grip tightened on the wheel as he swallowed his unease. "Have we met before?" forcing a nervous laugh. That's when she turned her head slowly, unnaturally, like a puppet on strings. Her face was pale, almost too pale. Her lips barely moved when she spoke. "You don't remember, do you?" Nathan's heart pounded. He didn't know her, he was sure of it. And yet, something about her face felt familiar. His breathing grew shallow. He forced himself to focus on the road. This was just a weird encounter, nothing more. But his hands felt clammy on the wheel. He stole another glance at her. She was still staring. The way she sat, motionless, made his skin crawl. Then, under her breath, she whispered, "We've done this before." A wave of nausea hit him. "What do you mean?" His voice came out shaky. She didn't respond, just looked back out the window. He pressed down on the gas, suddenly desperate to get her out of his car. But the road stretched on like he was driving in circles. When he checked the rearview mirror, there were no headlights behind them, no signs of civilization. He flicked on the radio to break the silence, static. No music, no voices, just a low, crackling hum. He twisted the dial, but every station was the same. He could hear his own breathing, shallow and uneven. Then, beneath the static, a whisper, his name. He shut the radio off, heart hammering in his chest. The girl hadn't moved. He gripped the wheel, trying to focus. The fog outside seemed thicker now, swirling unnaturally in the headlights. He forced out a shaky breath. "We're almost there," he lied, hoping she'd believe him. She finally turned her head again, slow, deliberate. "I know," she murmured. Then she smiled too wide, too empty. His stomach twisted. The air inside the car felt suffocating, pressing against him like unseen hands. He was gripping the wheel so tightly, his knuckles turned white. "I think you should get out here," he said, forcing his voice to stay steady. She didn't react, just kept staring. His foot eased off the gas, the car rolling to a stop on the empty road. He turned to face her fully, but the seat was empty. His breath caught in his throat. He hadn't heard the door open. The car was still locked. His fingers fumbled for the handle, his pulse racing. He turned, scanning the darkness outside, but there was no sign of her, only the thick, swirling fog. He reached for his phone, desperate to call someone, anyone. No service. The screen flickered, then died. A sinking feeling settled in his gut. His headlights cut through the mist, illuminating the road ahead. That's when he saw her standing in front of the car, smiling. He couldn't move. Her dress hung limp, her hair covering half her face, but the grin, it was unnatural, stretching her lips in a way that made his stomach churn. She raised her hand, palm pressing against the hood of his car. Then, without a sound, she vanished. He slammed the car into gear, tires screeching as he sped down the road. His heart thundered in his chest. He didn't stop, didn't look back. The fog swallowed everything behind him, erasing the road like it had never existed. His hands shook on the wheel, but when he glanced at the rearview mirror, she was in the back seat. He couldn't breathe. The girl sat in the back seat, her face half hidden in shadow. His hands were shaking as he gripped the wheel, his foot pressing harder on the gas. But the faster he drove, the heavier the air inside the car became. He felt her presence cold, suffocating. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. She was still there, sitting unnaturally still. That eerie smile stretched across her pale face. "You're going the wrong way," she whispered. His blood turned to ice. He didn't answer, he just kept driving. The road ahead twisted and turned, but nothing looked familiar. Hadn't he just passed that mile marker? His stomach lurched. He was stuck. No matter how far he drove, the road remained the same, empty, endless, and drowning in fog. He forced himself to speak, though his voice came out shaky. "Who are you?" The girl tilted her head slightly. "You already know," she murmured. His pulse pounded. "I didn't know her, I was sure of it." But something deep in his memory stirred, like a whisper he couldn't quite hear. He risked another glance in the mirror. She was gone. His breath caught in his throat. He slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as the car skidded to a stop. His heart pounded. He turned slowly, terrified of what he'd see. The back seat was empty, but something was wrong. The air was heavy, thick with an invisible weight. And then he heard it, a faint, wet whisper right beside his ear. "You left me." A shiver ran down his spine. He didn't dare move. The voice had been so close, too close, like someone was leaning right against his ear. But when he turned, the seat beside him was empty. The car was silent, except for his own ragged breathing. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking, no signal. His heart pounded. He needed to get out of here. Slamming the car into drive, he floored the gas, his tires screeching against the damp pavement. But as he sped forward, his headlights caught something up ahead. A figure stood in the road. The girl. His stomach dropped. She was smiling, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, her hollow eyes locked onto his. He yanked the wheel, swerving hard. The car spun, tires skidding, and then darkness. He woke to silence. Cold night air seeped through his broken window. His car had crashed into a ditch, the front end crumpled. His head throbbed, his vision swimming as he struggled to sit up. And then he heard it again, a whisper, right outside the car. He turned slowly, his pulse hammering. The passenger door hung open. The girl was gone, or maybe she had never been there. But then he noticed something that made his stomach twist. On the cracked screen of his phone, a message had appeared, 4 words glowing in the darkness. "You never left me. Nathan doesn't remember how he got home that night." The next thing he knew, he was parked outside his apartment, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly they ached. He told himself it was just a dream, a hallucination from exhaustion. But deep down, he knew the truth. He never drove that road again, and he never picked up a hitchhiker. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when his room is completely silent. He hears it, that same soft whisper. You never left me.